Lisa, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to jump right in. And the reason I'm so excited to have you here today is because you are, well, just to give everyone some background, you are in Fractional CMO School. So you're one of my students, and you came to me with a question. And I said, rather than answering this inside the program, I would love to have you on the podcast because this is something that comes up a lot. And I think that we together, by answering this publicly, can really help a lot of other marketers who are in similar situations. So I'm just really grateful for you for willing to be vulnerable, come on the show and be coached and just have this conversation with me. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read part of your question that you submitted to me. So you said to me, I've been doing fractional CMO work, but the experience hasn't been amazing. And I think I've realized why. What I don't want to do, manage teams, being in their Slack, being pulled into copy, content, and campaigns, acting as a marketing director, essentially. What I do want, project-based strategy work, clear problems, and I provide a clear strategic solution all mapped out, working directly with the founder or CEO, high-level thinking around growth, retention, positioning, campaign strategy, defined scope, not ongoing in the weeds involvement. I think where I've gone wrong is blurring the line between strategist and operator and defaulting into campaign and team when that's actually the part I dislike the most. So now I'm trying to figure out, number one, how best to position this because it doesn't feel like fractional CMO anymore. And number two, how do I bring in AI and the systems and processes I've developed recently when what I found is brands are still only using the tip of the iceberg? So I want to bring that in too, and all these things. And I'm feeling a bit disillusioned with the fractional model as I've experienced it so far, but also clear that I don't want to go back to what I was doing before. So
It's a big question.
it's a big question, but it's not uncommon. The amount of times I've talked to marketers in my DMs or over coffee and heard something really similar, like, I hate the fractional model, or I'm so burnt out from working this way. And I think one of the reasons I can relate and I can support so well in this space is because I was there myself. So when I started this work, I too had really similar experiences. And I had this very messy middle experience of what is this role? And how do I do this in a way that actually feels good for me, where I'm not slipping into execution or I'm not finding myself working crazy hours or it doesn't spiral into this weird undefined scope of work where it just goes and goes and goes. And then I'm doing stuff I don't like. So there definitely was a period of my business as well where it happened to me. And it was through experiencing that I was able to start sort of shaping the role and figuring out what does work, what are my boundaries, what does this role really look like. And
Mm.
I see it so often. And it's honestly one of the main reasons why I created Fractional CMO School was just talking to marketers and really having a lot of empathy for where they were at and knowing that there was a better way and just wanting to show everyone who was interested, like how I've set it up in a way that really works for me. So I'm so excited to chat through all of this with you.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to hear what you think.
Yeah. Okay. So before we jump in, I would love to give our listeners, and if you're watching this, a little bit of a background for you. So, can you tell us a little bit about you? How long have you been in marketing? What was your experience like before this? What were you doing before fractional CMO work? Just a little bit of a background around you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've been in marketing, solely marketing my entire career, and that's about 26 years. I can't believe how long that sounds and is, but I'm obsessed with marketing, everything to do with marketing. I just think it's the most amazing mix of creativity and numbers and data and leadership and creating change. And it's also something that people, founders and even big companies and entire teams sometimes really struggle with. I heard a really good quote the other day. It was a mixture of math and magic, I think the quote was.
Mm.
So I really love being able to help people understand and start to love marketing. So my past life, I was in media and entertainment and leading marketing teams and launching brands. And then when I had my first baby 10 years ago, I started working for myself. And since then, I was a marketing consultant, and then I created a course, and then I created a coaching program and a mastermind. And I did that and worked one-on-one with female founded brands as well. And I did that for about, 8, 9 years. Just in the past few months, just realized the industry has changed in terms of courses and coaching programs, with people adopting AI. And plus, I just felt a little burnt out by it all and I wanted to change.
Hmm.
And my happy place when I looked at what I loved and what I didn't love, my happy place was strategy and leadership and getting under the hood of a business, finding out what's not working, what's the numbers telling us. I'm obsessed with, the story that numbers tell us because at the end of the day, that is where the truth is. And yeah, working with teams or founders to implement, not me doing the implementation and not even me getting in the weeds there with them. So when I came across your profile and I listened to your podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that I've been looking for. You're staying at that higher level and you're leading. And I kind of think of it as the helicopter view. You're looking at
Yes.
all the moving parts and I think as a good marketer, you've got the instinct, but you've also got the ability to read the data and also what the founder wants. You marry all that together and that's where you get like a wonderful strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go. So I closed down my courses. I finished up my group coaching program, started to put my feelers out and definitely got some amazing clients this year. And they've been, really, really wonderful people to work with, wonderful brands to work with. And they've been beautiful parts of those partnerships, the strategy and the leadership. But I've definitely made the mistake of blurring the boundaries. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And what I find so difficult is holding those boundaries of staying as the strategy person and not getting into the doing and the team aspect of it.
Yes. Yeah. I can completely understand and relate. And I am sure that most people listening to this are sitting there nodding their heads
Yeah.
if they've ever done this work. And certainly when you're first doing it, there's this calibration time that can be really difficult. So I'm excited to chat about all of that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the clients that you worked with, or even what were you originally brought in to do? Maybe that.
Yeah. So they're a mixture of pretty established brands, one or two are a bit newer, so around the 1 million to 2 million turnover. Others go all the way up to $15 million turnover, product-based businesses, and brought in really to reinvigorate and investigate their marketing. So tighten everything up, particularly the strategy. Where do we want to go? Who are we? What are we missing? Where is the profit lying? And hiding, and to a certain degree, looking at processes and systems to improve the efficiency. So, kind of in a nutshell, that's what I was brought in to look at.
Okay, that's great. That's really good context. So let's dive into, and if it's helpful, you can think of one client, you could think of all of them, whatever's helpful for these examples. But I want to start going into what did this actually look like for you? What did the role look like in your mind before you started versus in actuality? And where did you start to feel that misalignment? So I'd love to hear once you started with these clients or a client, if we were thinking of one, what did your, day to day look like or your week look like with them?
So, generally, when I start working with a new client, they get my full attention for at least 2 to 3 weeks, where I'm diving into the business, going through all the data. And depending on how big the business is, that can really blow out. So, one particular client was a very large business, and I ended up spending 5 days a week, like I want to say 24/7, looking at this business because it was a big business and lots of moving parts and lots of areas that we could go. So I found I'd spent at least a month reviewing and then another month putting the strategy together because it was big and I was managing other clients at the same time.
Yeah,
So already that kind of blew out for me.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can completely understand that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's my fault too, the fact that I get really excited about the potential and the brands, and I can go down
Yeah.
rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe, the scope creep definitely started with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can understand that. So I think that's a really good place to start because there's a whole process around building out strategy that I think for me took a long time to refine to a place that, was quick and I don't want to say easy. Like I love
Mm,
strategy. It does come easily to me, but it's not
mhm,
like, oh, that was done in 5 minutes. Like I do find that it can be a heavy lift, but there also can be a phase for myself, for many marketers, where as a marketer and you're coming into a fresh business, we can see like hundreds, if not thousands of different things that
mhm.
could be done.
Yeah.
And
Mhm, mhm,
the temptation, or where I have seen students struggle with when they're shifting into this role, is having clarity around what does that strategy process look like? Like, what is the
mhm,
appropriate sized strategy for this client? How do I build this out? What's my timelines for this? What goes into this and what doesn't? And I think
mhm,
if you don't have a really clear understanding of what that strategy should be, it's really easy to your point, spend 2 months building out a strategy because you have turned over every single rock in the business.
mhm.
And you've probably put together a strategy that would take them like a year to 5 or so years to
Yeah.
get through, right? Because again, as a marketer, you're like, they could do this, they could do that. And it can be tempting to like fall that into a strategy. And so I think number one, that is maybe where things started to go off the rails a little bit, is
Mhm,
having more structure around your strategy process. This is, news for you, news for the students too.
mhm,
I'm actually currently redoing my training for strategy because
mm.
while it's thorough, I want to add more uh, checkpoints or
Yeah.
like tangible pieces where, as a student, you have these guardrails that are
I
really
was just gonna
clear.
say guardrails.
Yeah, because I can understand if something's not crystal clear, I can understand the misinterpretation. And I've seen it happen before where someone is building out something just wildly overscoped and they've spent an entire month full time working on a strategy.
Mhm,
And so I think that that's a piece of it, is really having a clear defined scope around your strategy when you're building things out and giving yourself permission to. It took me a while to learn this, but we don't need to put everything in the strategy. And
mhm,
when I'm building out strategy, I think there is a difference between like the roadmap or the skeleton of the strategy and the detailed strategies.
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
when I'm building out a strategy for a client, I first have to make sure I'm not overturning every rock and I'm looking at like what matters right now and
Mhm,
checking myself and being like, how big is this team? Like, what can they
mhm,
actually do? They're just going to be overwhelmed if I give them 100 things. And if I look at
mhm,
everything, then I'm going to be overwhelmed. So, really tightening up that and matching my scope to the client size. So, there's that piece. And then when I create strategy, this part did take me a while to learn about how I'm going to be mapping out all the things I want us to do in that strategy. But that doesn't mean all of the details are going to be in the strategy.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll just give you some examples of like a recent client strategy I was
Yeah.
working on. You need to reposition this offer because it's
Mhm.
the positioning's poor. We're not speaking to the target market, whatever, right? That's number one. I'll give you just a really, basic version. Number
Yeah.
two is that, I want to fix this funnel, like how we're
Mhm,
selling this strategy. And this is kind of overarching observations and what needs to be fixed. Number
mhm,
three is you don't have the right team. We need to kind of restructure your team. So what I put into strategy is high level, like those observations and my recommendations. What I'm not putting in is all of the detail. So
mm,
they're not necessarily getting, like I might have said, you need to reposition your offer, you need to fix this launch thing in these ways. The strategy they're getting at the end of the day does not have every single detail. That then
mhm,
becomes the ongoing work. So let's just say, okay, we're past strategy, we've delivered strategy, right? Now we're moving into implementation. Let's say, okay, we decided number one priority was repositioning your offer. So now, in month one of actually working together, one of my strategic deliverables is going to be that strategy. So giving yourself
Wow.
permission that that doesn't all have to be crammed into your initial deliverable. Like you're saying, wow, but like I have literally done that too and been like, oh my God, why am I getting myself to do like literally what would be probably a year or two of work in a
Yeah.
month? Like that's insane, right?
Yeah.
So I think that
Yeah,
would,
that makes so much sense, and I've done the absolute opposite of that,
yeah,
and It's got a lot to do, I think, with most women, we overdeliver, where
Yes.
we just want to please and we want to get everything perfect and give all of ourselves and give
Ah,
all of the answers. I know that's a
yeah.
chronic problem of mine. So that's exactly what I've done. I've done a year's worth of work in a month. No wonder I was working 24/7.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just three priorities. I tend to look at all aspects of the business. And that,
Yeah.
when we're talking about marketing, it's, website, brand, message, customer, email, paid advertising,
Yeah.
organic, all of that in a month delivered to the client. It creates a pressure cooker for me, but it also creates something for the client that they're potentially overwhelmed with.
Oh, totally. Like, I can
Yeah.
probably guess what they said because I have delivered that strategy too. And do you
Yeah.
know what they said to me? Wow,
Wow. Yeah.
we're
Whoa.
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
you almost get the opposite reaction of what you were going for. And you're kind of like, are they disappointed?
And it's almost like we're talking two different languages, that we're like, we've done a great job. Here is this amazing strategy document that a marketer would look at it and go, my God, that is freaking awesome. But the
Yeah.
client who isn't a marketing strategist would look at
Yeah.
it and go, crap, how's my team going to do this?
Totally. They're so overwhelmed and they don't know where to start. And so, not only, it's like, let's pull way back here and look at what's
Hmm.
going on. So, number one, like you nailed it. Often as women, we are overgiving. And
Hmm.
sometimes there's some perfectionism going on. I know there
Hmm.
is for me. I'm like always a recovering perfectionist and people
Yeah.
pleaser. There can also be some worthiness at play
Mhm.
if you're charging a lot of money. Like when I
Definitely.
first build out my first strategy at 15K, and 20K, I was like, whoa, this is a lot of money. I better blow their socks off.
Yeah.
And when I delivered and it had that opposite reaction, it just further put me into a tailspin of like, now I have to prove myself because they're overwhelmed now. And now I have to do more work to make it not feel overwhelming and help them break this down and it's just kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So
Yeah.
that happens.
That's
And
literally
then
what happened. Yeah.
yeah, right? Like I've been there. I totally understand. So that happens. And then what actually happens later, and you probably realize this. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to ask you this question. So
Hmm.
once you started working with the team on this big strategy, tell me what happened.
Well, we were able to action most of the recommendations, but the team probably found it difficult to digest what I had given them. So it caused a little bit of not confusion, just overwhelm. And so then
Overwhelm.
I had to, yeah, then obviously then I would step in and help them more and more and more.
Yeah.
Kind of what you just explained. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like what you delivered, was it right sized? Was it too much for them? Were you able to work at the pace that you had initially thought when you laid out the strategy?
The pace wasn't a problem, but definitely the depth of information that I gave them was too much for them. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
was the feedback. It was like we need things a little bit more simple. So
Yes.
I had to simplify everything, which is
Yeah.
not something that I anticipated.
No, no, it never is, right? Like that was definitely something that I learned as well. And my first handful of strategies was the same feedback. And it took me a while of getting that feedback consistently to realize, oh, this isn't a client thing. This is
Mm.
actually something I need to change about how
Hmm.
I'm doing strategy because if the response is, whoa, or this is a lot, or we're feeling overwhelmed, or the reason I was asking you those questions is I have
Mm.
had clients who, I'm putting together what feels like a 1 year strategy for me. I mean, it's taken them 6 months to move through what I would have thought they'd get done in a month or two
Yeah.
because their
Hmm.
team is learning.
Yep.
They're going at a slower pace. They might not
Mm.
have the infrastructure. And so I think that what I learned was that simplifying
Mm.
and right sizing to the team. And then also, like I had mentioned, we don't need to deliver everything
Hmm.
up front. The other
Yep.
thing, too, I find when I was delivering everything up front versus how I work now is that even it sounds like, we have a very similar discovery process. I'm not sure how much you adapted from my training versus, your own. And I'm a huge
Hmm.
proponent of like adjusting things to be, putting
Hmm.
your own mark on it. So you don't need to follow mine exactly. But I am also looking at their whole business, like across
Hmm.
every single area. I find that Often, even though I'm being thorough at the beginning, often when I start working with clients in month 2, 3-ish, there's still more that I uncover that they're like, oh, yeah,
Yes,
we forgot to tell you this, or oh, yeah, there is
exactly.
actually this. And
Yeah.
I would find that I would have spent the same amount of hours you spent to deliver this wildly, robust, detailed strategy. And then by month 2, things were shifting because, well, now I see this. And okay, based on the results we got over here, let's pivot here.
Mhm.
And I had left myself very little room for flexibility and
Yeah.
adjusting to what we were learning and seeing in the market.
Yeah.
And then there was a little bit of, wow, I did all this work and a lot of it is kind of obsolete or we're pivoting
Yeah.
actually away from that direction. And
Yeah.
so that felt not great. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of learnings I had that have shaped my strategy process
Mm.
now and what that deliverable looks like now that
Yeah.
is so different than what I intuitively thought would have worked.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when that happens, the client will be like, well, you did all this work on this area of the business and now we haven't actioned it. And they start feeling like they haven't maybe got the value out of it or they've done something wrong. And that's not what we want them to feel either.
100%. Both of those things. Like I have had clients say they feel like there's the team morale is low because they're feeling like they are failing because they're
Yeah.
not hitting the timelines.
Yeah.
Or again, I have had clients sort of speak to value. This is such a common thing, and you probably know this too. When you stuff too many things into, let's say, a coaching program or a course,
Hmm.
and there's
Hmm.
too much, if people aren't using it all, they're not going to all the calls, they're not whatever.
Yeah.
Even if they're getting value, there's this perception of I'm not using it all. I'm not getting the
Yes.
value out of this, right? So
Yeah.
there's a
Totally.
little bit of that that can happen too
Mm.
when the strategy's too big.
Too big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
definitely something that I've experienced with all my courses and coaching programs that like my first course, it had everything about marketing, including the kitchen sink. And it just
Yeah.
takes people so long to get through it that you're not getting them from the A to the B. So there might be that disillusion. Yeah. That
Yeah.
feeling of not getting value. So
Yeah. I think as a marketer too, we can't unsee and unknow
yeah,
what we know.
exactly. That's right.
Sometimes when you're an expert in something, it can be tough to break it
Pull
down and
back.
sort of remember where somebody is.
Is yes, you gotta meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. It's definitely a big aha moment.
Let's go past strategy. So you're done the
Mhm,
strategy, you're working with the team. It sounds to
mhm.
me like that's when there also started to be some friction for you and
Yeah.
a little bit of these moments where you were like, this does not feel like I thought it would, or I'm not sure if I like being a fractional CMO. So can you talk me through
Mm,
what that felt like and what were those moments? Like if you can kind of drop into like a few examples of your day,
yeah.
what did that look like?
So I was in all of their team meetings, which is difficult when you're remote because you're just a floating face.
Mhm.
And most businesses, well, that I've worked with, they're not necessarily used to having a team member or a part of the leadership team as remote. They definitely are working with contractors and freelancers remotely, but not as a like a weekly ongoing. So that was a learning curve for some of the teams that I've worked with. Also being in like their Slack or their Asana or in other tools that they use to communicate. That again, as a people pleaser, I was onto things as soon as they came through. And I've done that in previously with coaching clients, having Slack channels. I just end up, answering questions and giving feedback all day long. So that's a boundary thing as well. And giving feedback on things that are happening in real time that I may not necessarily have looked at in the strategy. So I'm giving feedback that may not be the right feedback because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So it was a mixture of things and also just working with like team members. When I was a marketing manager and marketing director in my past life, that was the last thing that I liked doing, which is working with people and handling emotions and things like that. It's not my jam. So I think that's definitely what I didn't expect either.
Was there a lot of that, like one-on-ones with people or sort of navigating team dynamics?
For one client, there was a fair bit of it, yeah.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason why they needed my help, but it kind of wasn't something that I expected to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So when you think about your time, your days, your weeks,
Mm.
what was the majority of your time spent on?
Providing feedback and creating campaign concepts, understanding processes and trying to refine processes, which is what some of them wanted. But in reality, because I'm not in the day to day, the processes that I was thinking might work wasn't something that was going to work for them. And it's a very granular processes and templates and planning documents. Like that's not necessarily what I was there to do.
Yeah, I can totally see
'Cause
that. You can very quickly slip into operations or project management
definitely, and
and
that's
things like that.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what happened. Yeah.
And when you say feedback, tell me a little bit about that. Feedback on what kinds of things?
Oh gosh, anything and everything, whatever comes through like a marketing team, from campaign ideas to copy for website pages, and because all that comes easily to me, I'll be like, "Yeah, I can do that for you."
So you were also executing on some stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Were you executing because they didn't have time, they didn't have the skill set?
A mixture of everything.
Okay.
And most of the clients that I work with, it's that they don't have the skill set, whereas writing and campaign concepts, very, very easy for me, but when you start doing a lot of it for multiple clients, it will take up your whole day.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I can see at least 4 or 5, I would say, common mistakes or
Mhm.
missteps that people will make when they're in this role, and particularly when they're in a bigger scope. Like, I'm assuming this was a full scope, bigger package
Yes, yeah, there
client,
was the
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So, a couple things.
yeah.
I'm going to speak to all of them and then we'll dive into each of them.
Okay.
So, there's a big, huge difference between the CMO role and a marketing manager esque
Mhm,
project manager type role. So, I want to talk about that a little bit because there's definitely some things, and you know this already, like copywriting and
mhm,
stuff. There's some things there that you were stepping out of the boundaries of the role a little bit
mhm.
there. Then there's also the pace thing. You didn't say this, but I'm going to assume, just based on what you've told me and based on how I know a lot of women can
Yep.
operate, is that there might have also been a self imposed pace that you were working at that
Mhm.
was probably unsustainable. Like, I need to get this whole thing done this month, like
Yeah.
pressuring yourself to work at a pace that was probably too quick for the scope and time you had
Mhm.
with the client.
Yeah.
Then there's the piece around what I'd like to call like driving, and I have an analogy that we'll get into in a little bit, but
Mhm.
when I think about this role, one of the pieces that's really important is that we're coming in as a leader and we're driving what that looks like in a lot of different ways. So there's
Mhm.
big and small ways in which this looks like. So when I first started, I made a lot of the mistakes you made where
Mhm.
I saw myself as this, let's say, Lego piece, and I would like slot right into their business. And what would happen then was I went from being a leader to being an order taker because then I was no longer in control of my calendar. I was in all
Mhm.
their meetings whenever they had them.
Mhm.
I was not in control of my day or my priorities because I was using Slack, or I was responding to whenever things came up. And
Mhm.
also I was not in control of process either because it wasn't my process, it was their process. So there
Mhm.
was a lot of ways in which I would step into clients' businesses and sort of almost be like, how can I help you? And like,
Yeah.
chameleon myself into their
Morph.
business, morph myself into their business. And then I would find myself so burnt out.
Mhm.
And then I'm trying to juggle other clients too. And I would
Mhm.
find that I don't know what I'm doing that day because it's like, what's going to come up in Slack?
Yes.
I want to have no meetings on Monday, but I guess I can't because that's their team meeting. And
Yes.
I thought this was a priority, but now they want to do this. And I started to feel really powerless in the role. And I started to have a lot of resentment towards the clients I was working with. And it wasn't until I repeated that mistake many, many, many times that I realized it's all in how I'm working. And so
Mm.
I'm going to talk about a few things. Number one is really understanding the role of a CMO. And I'm going to give you a tool here that I use. It's
Yep.
really simple, but it's something that I use. And I literally still to this day have to remind myself about this because the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the over delivering, like that doesn't go away. It's just
Mhm.
I have to check myself,
Mhm.
make sure, hey, don't go there again, right? Like
Don't
don't
do
burn
that.
yourself out again. So
Yeah.
when it comes to role, for people listening, if you don't know this, I'm going to reground in like, what does a CMO do?
Yeah.
So setting strategy and direction, owning the marketing strategy or roadmap, right? Like what are we doing and when?
Mhm.
Making high level decisions, leading the marketing function, which we'll talk about what does that actually look like,
Mm.
advising the leadership team. So, sort of being that like marketing thought partner to them
Mhm.
and really owning the marketing arm. That's not it, but
Mm.
that's the role. What a marketing manager does or project manager is and other team members, any execution. Like any execution's never on the table, even if you're good at it. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, but any execution, managing campaigns. So when I deliver a campaign strategy, it doesn't mean that I'm going to then break it all down and say, okay, for this email flow, Allie's going to write the copy Tuesday, and then we're going to get revisions. And then so and so is going to set it all up in
Mhm.
Kit. Then we're going to test. No,
Mm.
they need to figure all that out. So we're
Mhm.
not project managing the campaigns, not happening. And we're not order takers and not in an egotistical way, but we're not being
Mhm.
told what to do. We are thought partners with the leadership team. So we are in those
Mhm.
conversations and we're steering with them. So all of those things, as far as delivery goes, like we're sitting above or overseeing. So there, it can be a slippery slope, but we just want to make sure we're sitting way up here. And I thought it was really important to have this conversation with you because I want to read what you said that you loved again. You
Mhm.
said you love project based strategy work, clear problems with a clear strategic solution all mapped out, working directly with the founder and CEO, high level thinking, so growth, retention, positioning, campaign strategy. And you said defined scope, not going ongoing in the weeds involvements.
Mm.
Most of that, except the ongoing, most of
Mhm.
that, all of those other things, that is a CMO
Mm.
role when you're doing it within the right scope. So, a filter that really has helped me to kind of check myself and say, should I be doing this? Is I will often think about any big company, let's say Lululemon or
Mm.
Nike, and I'll
Mhm.
think like, would the CMO of Nike be
Mm.
doing this?
Yeah.
And that for me is really grounding because, like, yes, we're going to be working with smaller clients. Like, we're not a Nike sized business is not
Mhm.
hiring a fractional CMO, but I
Mhm.
do think it's a nice way to reconnect to what is the role of a CMO. And I think if we pull way back and we look at this model, because it's so easy to say, oh, but they need all this stuff. Yes, but the answer
Mm.
isn't just us doing it because we
Mhm.
can. We need execution in marketing. I'm not saying we don't. That is so
Yeah.
important and we need really good people. But I think what you're saying is you love all the strategy work and you want to stay there. And so that filter of would the CMO of Nike or Lululemon or Peloton do this? I have worked in corporate. I worked at Lululemon. I worked at Deloitte. I've worked in some bigger brands and I do know what their role is. They are not
Mhm.
looking at every
Mm.
social post. They're not digging into Asana and assigning tasks. They're not doing any
Mhm.
of that. And I think that whenever I find myself feeling frustrated or resentful, it's usually because I have creeped outside of that role. And what happens is instead of solving the client's problem in a way that actually makes sense for the long term, we can sometimes just do what's easy right now. So
Yeah.
because it's quick for you and it's easy for you, you're like, oh, I'll just jump in and do that because it'll take me 5 minutes and they don't have the team or they don't have the
Mm.
skill set. And it's actually going to take me longer to explain this or coach them. Or
Mhm.
if I don't do this, then this campaign will fail. Or they don't have the budget to hire this role. Or if we go recruit for this, it's going to take longer. But the thing is, what happens when we do that is a few things. Number one, is if you're charging appropriately for your fee, you're probably charging, 10, 15K a month to work with this client. And you can very easily quickly find yourself doing a large portion of execution. And suddenly they're looking at you and saying, why am I paying you
Uh-huh.
$15,000 a month to write copy and
Uh-huh.
project manage campaigns in Asana? That's not worth that amount of money. And so you can devalue yourself in trying to be valuable and trying to be helpful and in trying to solve a problem for them. You can actually devalue yourself and have them sitting there thinking, I'm way overpaying. And they are. And you know that too, right? If you were sitting there and they said, Lisa, we need a project manager. What should we pay them per month? You'd be like, oh, I don't know. If they're mid-level experience, probably this salary, and they'd be
Uh-huh.
full time, right? And it's not going to be 15K a month, right? So
Uh-huh.
we know this, but it can be
Mm.
so tempting to jump in and save the day
Yeah.
and solve these problems.
Sorry to interrupt. It doesn't fix the problem for them because they're going to have the same problem when you're not working with them, and then
Exactly. Like
just keeps on going.
they're still not going to have the skill set or the budget or. So
Yeah.
that brings me to the next section, which we'll talk about in a minute, is client fit. But before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about this notion of driving. So number one, if we pull way back, we've talked about knowing the role of a CMO and staying there and having that filter to stay there,
Uh-huh.
and then having boundaries around that. And I have inside of Fractional CMO School like some coaching around like how do you even have those conversations, because sometimes it can feel really weird and uncomfortable to be like, oh, sorry, I'm not going to do that. And so
Yes.
having those boundaries and feeling okay about having those conversations or saying no to things or saying, hey, there's a gap here and here's a few different ways we could solve this. So the role, the boundaries, either not doing execution or admitting to yourself, look, I love execution and that's actually what I want to do.
Uh-huh.
So those pieces. And then the driving side of things. So I want to talk about that a little bit before we talk about client fit. So when it comes to driving, I have this funny analogy that I like
Uh-huh.
to use where I remember seeing something or reading something about parenting. And it was all about how, this will make sense in a minute. It's all about
Uh-huh.
how, toddlers or younger children will act out or have temper tantrums. And it can get worse if they feel like no one's in control because they feel unsafe. And it's kind of like, if you as the parent aren't driving, you're not
Uh-huh.
leading the family energetically or with clear boundaries, they don't know this and they would never be able to
Mm.
articulate this, but in their body, they're just like, this is not safe. This feels
Yeah.
erratic because sometimes mom says, I can have iPad after school. And sometimes she says no. And sometimes I have to come in and wash my hands right away. If
Yeah.
the rules are changing, they're just like,
Yeah.
what's happening? I
Yeah.
don't know what to expect here. And that doesn't feel safe to my body. And it's
Yeah.
funny because clients are kind of the same. I
Uh-huh.
find, and this has definitely been a muscle I've had to grow and learn over the last,
Uh-huh.
5 years that I've been doing this, but I find clients are the exact same. If we're coming in and particularly like I am very much a recovering people pleaser and, wanting to be liked. And if I'm coming in with that energy and hey, we could do this or that, or
Uh-huh.
feeling them out, I became very vigilant as a child and an adult. And how are people
Uh-huh.
feeling and how
Yeah.
do I need to adapt and bend myself to appease them and
Mm.
letting their mood or their energy or what they wanted to do dictate what we would do instead of
Yeah.
me coming in as a leader. And so I brought all of that with me, like giant
Yeah.
suitcases into every single
Yeah.
client, right? And it took me a long time to A, realize I was doing that, and B, start correcting that and showing up like a leader and saying, okay, this is what I think. And actually I don't agree with that. And this is how I work. These are the meetings we're gonna have. This is when I do have meetings. This is when I don't have meetings. This is when
Uh-huh.
I'm reachable. This is when I'm not. If we use Slack, then I check it. I have a process where I check it twice a day at this time and this
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh.
And if something's urgent, this is how you can contact me. Or,
Uh-huh.
I will need at least 48 hours to
Mm.
review things, like building these rules around how I work and telling them so that they're not
Yeah.
telling me how I'm supposed to work inside their business.
Yeah.
And it really was uncomfortable for me at first.
Mm.
Very uncomfortable for me at first. It felt like my skin would crawl and I'd be like,
Mm.
oh, they're going to hate me. They're going to like be so annoyed. But I really have found that, like, if I can sort of compare and contrast how I used to work to working that way now, clients are so much easier for me when I come in and I lead, because
Yeah.
like that toddler example, when a client feels like I have the wheel and I'm driving
Yeah.
and we're safe
They
and I'm
feel
like,
good.
I got this.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I know where we're
Mm.
going. I know what we're doing.
Yeah.
I got this. Instead of me being like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Like they
Yeah.
step in and they're like, I'm driving. We're going here. Take this left
Yeah.
turn. It can turn into that. And I can sense that now when it's starting to go that direction. And it's easy now for me to be like, crap, I actually let go of the wheel. Like, I
Take
got
the
to get
wheel.
this back and drive again and be proactive and talk to them about what they might be thinking about, and just come in with that leadership energy of like, this is
Yeah.
how I work. This is what I'm thinking, and not being afraid to push back. And that has made the world of a difference, because it's gone from a client's energy and a client's business driving me and my life and my day and how I work, to the
Mhm.
opposite, where
Mhm.
I'm like, well, no, this is how I'm going to work.
Yeah.
And I think that is a natural, nice bridge to the next section, which is client fit, because
Mhm.
that might not work for every single client. So let's talk
Mhm.
about that. Before we jump into there, was there anything you wanted to add around like scope, boundaries, pace, anything?
No, the only thing that I kind of struggle with is in the description of a CMO is owning the marketing arm. Where
Mm.
does that start and where does it end? That's the tricky one for me.
Totally. And I could probably do like a 10-hour podcast on that,
Yeah.
but really high level. Again, the way that I see it is I use that filter because it's going to be
Mm.
different. Let's say if I own the marketing and everything under the marketing umbrella ultimately is sitting on my shoulders, then what happens if the paid ads agency we have is not doing a good job and we need to find a new
Mhm.
one? What does that look like?
Mhm.
What does my role in that look like?
Mhm.
Well, if I think about it, there are things that, and maybe the Nike example might not quite make sense because there's going to be some
Mhm.
stuff that they wouldn't do because it's such a massive company. But
Mhm.
I look at it like, if I were to shake out like a box, all the things that need to be done to solve that problem, what are they? Number
Mhm.
one is figuring out, is it time to let this agency go? Yes or no? I
Mhm.
would say that's a CMO thing that I
Mhm.
would advise
Decision.
on,
Yep.
right? Number two, okay, let's say we're letting them go. We're going to replace them. Who are we replacing them with?
Yeah.
I'm going to be mapping out like potential costs. Okay, based
Yeah.
on all of my experience, my 15, 20, 25 years experience, this
Mhm.
is roughly what we can expect to pay.
Mhm.
And based on, all these things, this is what we should be looking for. So we're mapping out
Mhm.
whether they stay or go, what they should cost, who we're looking for,
Yep.
roughly high level, right?
Yep.
Where people can make a mistake is they'll start actually recruiting. They'll turn into
Yeah.
the HR manager and they will be
Yeah.
reaching out to agencies and meeting with them and interviewing them and all these things. And there's definitely pieces as a fractional CMO that I would input on. Like, I would definitely want final say on who we're bringing in. And I might
Mhm.
say to the HR person or an HR contractor, if this client doesn't have one, but I might tell them what's important to me, what kinds of things I would look for and ask, and
Mm.
give them essentially the framework. I'm not doing any of the HR and recruiting and interviewing and things like that. I might
Yeah.
have a final meeting with the one or two candidates that we think are great. But again, I'm not doing all the in between, and I'm not going to be
Okay.
onboarding
Yeah.
them or pulling all the assets they need. Like that all starts to get into either HR or marketing execution.
Uh,
So when you're asking the question, what is that boundary between owning the marketing arm as a CMO and slipping out of that role? It depends a lot around what challenge you're trying to solve. And so I think
mhm.
that's why I like that filter, because it does work well in the context of whatever the challenge is. Like, it could be
Mhm.
maybe a campaign isn't performing well. So as a CMO, yeah, you can be ideating on different levers to pull
Mhm.
and looking at the metrics, but you're not the one in the back end of Google pulling the metrics. You're telling your team what to pull. And
Mhm.
you're not the one rewriting the landing page copy so that the page converts better. I find that there isn't very clear defined list
Mm.
because it depends what you're solving. But that's why I like
Yeah.
that filter. It just
Yeah.
grounds me in, does this feel like CMO work or does this feel like I'm doing something else? And then
Yeah.
for me too, this will depend a little bit on your personality and your human design and everything probably, but I just know when I'm feeling frustrated, it's a pretty good indicator that
Yeah.
I'm not in the right
The right.
place.
Yeah.
And then for you too, because you have this list of what you really love, even putting that on a post-it note on your
Yeah.
wall and looking at that and being like, am I doing this? And I
Yeah.
actually had, oh, this just came to my brain. I had this on my desk for a long time when I first started and I was trying to break these
Mhm.
habits. It was the question of what can I delegate?
Mm.
Because I was I think a lot of women are like this as well. We can hold a lot. If you're a
Mhm.
mom especially, you're like, "I got this. I can solve
Mm,
this. I can
yeah.
do this. I carry all these things." And I found I would take on and
Yeah.
say yes, and then be like, "Wait, why am I doing this thing?" And so
Mm.
I just had this visual prompt until it became second nature for me of what can I delegate? What of this
Yeah.
is not mine to be doing? And so I'm
Mhm.
constantly asking myself that and offloading and not only is it better for you because then you get to stay in the CMO role, but you also get to be worth what you're charging and
Mhm.
you get to train the team too. They
Yeah.
get to step up and step into something that might be new for them or you get to help the company build out a capability that they actually need anyways.
Thank you.
And then let's talk about client fit because we talked about boundaries and we talked about the role, but that's not everything. Like you could be so clear on your role, you could be so clear on boundaries, you could be doing all the right things. And if we were to end this episode today
Mhm.
here, you might go and work in practice and then be like, ah, Jess, but what about this? Or this isn't working.
Mhm.
And the thing is, because no amount of boundaries, of knowing your role, of you driving, no amount of that is going to fix a situation if the client is not the right fit for a
Mhm.
CMO or if you haven't fit them appropriately to the package. So
Mm.
there's two
Yeah.
things there that are
Yeah.
really important. And you could be banging your head against the wall, being like, I'm doing everything Jess said, and
Yeah.
I'm still here again. And I say this with the most understanding because I
Mhm.
have done it so many times. And I literally just did it this year where I was like, I'm going to try to make this client work.
Yeah.
Long story short, they weren't the right client. They didn't tick all the boxes they needed to tick. And I found myself making all my old same mistakes again. So I want to talk about what I think needs to be true for a client to need a CMO. So, number one is they have to be willing to bring in a leader and really truly want a leader. And I think that starts from the very first touch point where they're a lead to you. Like there's small things I weave through my lead generation and sales process
Mm.
that subtly position me as a leader who sits beside them, not underneath them. And I
Mhm.
don't mean that in an egotistical way, but
Yeah.
I mean that in like, I don't want them to think they're bringing in someone to do marketing, to bring their vision to life. It's
Yeah.
collaborative, right? They're going to
Yeah.
always be a visionary CEO, but I want them to know and understand that if they're bringing me in, I want to be in the room with them making decisions, not
Mhm.
downstream and not the person who's like being told what we're doing and what the decisions are, because that's not the
Mhm.
value I can bring. I know I'm strategic. I know that I have a lot of experience I can pull from that will help them make better decisions faster. And
Yeah.
so seeding that and making sure that they want that, they're open to that, because some are not.
Mhm.
Some are like,
Yeah.
no, I got this. I
Yeah.
personally, I don't actually work anymore with people who call themselves a marketing expert or business coaches because they don't want that. They just want someone to
No.
do. And
Yeah.
I kind of kept hitting up against the same challenges when I'd work
Mhm.
with that kind of a person. And then I was like, wait a minute, they see themselves as a marketing expert. So they don't
Yeah.
want the
Yeah.
strategy, which is fine, right? So it's that fit. They have to be willing and want that. Then they also have to have respect, of course, but
Fundament. Yeah.
sometimes it's subtle. And it's just this respect for leadership. If they're bringing in a CMO, you want to make sure that they're not going to be this person that's changing strategy every other week or
Mm.
overriding your recommendations because that's not going to feel good. So there's
Yeah.
those pieces that can be hard to screen for, but I think with my discovery and sales process, I've been able to sort of extract that or at least have some like early indicators of where I think that person might sit in relation
Yeah.
to that. And then the other two really important pieces is the team or resources to execute and the business complexity. And so those are
Mhm.
tied really, really closely to the package fit. And it's a little bit of a funny science, and we won't be able to go into all the detail on this episode. But if you have the wrong client on the wrong package, then even if they tick every other box, and
Mhm.
you are holding your scope true, ultimately at the end of the day, it's not going to work out because let's
Mm.
say they're a smaller company. I had an e-commerce company a couple of years ago. They were at like $3-4 million,
Mhm.
which for e-commerce is really small, as you know, like with product margins and stores and things like that. It doesn't leave a lot of money left over for marketing. And they wanted the full CMO package, but I wouldn't do it for them. I said,
Yeah.
not only can you not even remotely execute on the things that I would put together on that package for you, but I would be eating up your entire budget and you'd have
Yeah.
no money left over to actually do any of the things I was telling you to do. So
Yeah.
there's this tricky science of matching them because you're going to come in and it's not need based. And I think that's a really important distinction. It's not based on what they need. It's based on their team size and the complexity and the size of their business, because every single client you talk to is going to need your biggest package. Every single client could have all of you. Even my smallest clients could have had me working full time for them. And I know I could have added a ton of value. There's a
Yes.
million things I could do. And if anything,
Yeah.
the smaller they are, the
The
more you
more
can
the
do for
yeah.
them, right? The more you're like, oh God, there's this, there's that, there's all these things. But it's right sizing what package you're putting them on so that they actually have the resources to execute.
Yeah.
Because if they're
Yeah.
too small and you take up their budget and they can't execute, then that's not great. But if you can
Yeah.
match it properly and you're on just the right size package for them
Mhm.
and you're calibrating the strategy to also match, then what happens is they have the people to execute, the strategy's right sized, and your involvement is just the perfect amount of involvement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. There's no black and white to it. It's sort of feeling it out and, yeah, being realistic. And I find one big thing that I experience is if they don't have a marketing manager, that's where things really start to get tricky
Yes.
because by default, you just become that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
There has to be some sort of middle person between, because if I'm sitting next to the founder slash CEO, there's got to be some sort of buffer.
Totally. Yeah. And I'll
Mm.
say I have different, I guess, criteria for
Mhm.
clients based on the package level. But let's
Mhm.
just talk about the biggest package level.
Yep.
I would say for sure they need a
Right.
marketing manager. They need
Yep.
someone who's middle management that's overseeing the daily team, because
Yes.
you shouldn't be, as a CMO, reading every email, reading every social post, like
Yeah.
providing feedback on every asset. That should be them. And they should be project managing. They should be taking the big picture strategies you're creating or the positioning strategy or whatnot,
Yeah.
retention
And
strategy,
running with it.
and
Yeah.
running with that.
Yeah.
And your job is, if we kind of pull back and we look at, okay, I'm owning the marketing arm,
Mm.
you're working with the whole team, but it's less of the I'm managing as a
Yeah.
marketing manager, I'm managing as a project manager. It's more of the, hey, this social team that we just hired, I've noticed that since we brought them on, our engagement has gone really down. And,
Mm.
our email list growth from social
Yeah.
has gone down. And, what's happening? Let's look at the
Yeah.
strategy there. Like you have the capacity and the brain space to pull back
Mm.
and look at what's going on from like a fresh lens, because you're not like just trying to keep your head above water
Yes.
and trying to get the campaigns out the door, right? Like that's them. And so
Yeah.
it's not this nice, clean, beautiful checklist that I can sit here and say it's these 10 things. It's very package dependent and it's niche
Yes.
dependent. But I will
Yeah.
say, like, having a marketing manager, at least one person who's overseeing and doing all the marketing and leading is really important. Yeah.
That's like such a clarifier for that bigger package that it does need the marketing manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you get into that situation again that I brought up earlier of like, okay, the team's junior or they're scattered or there's no one bridging this. Who's going to do this if not me? Then you step in and you fill
Mm.
that gap and you end up doing things that are not CMO work and being
Yeah.
so in the weeds. And that's when you find yourself having to be really responsive on Slack and having to be in all the meetings because you're kind of sitting in a marketing manager role.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm often looking at, and I've been doing this long enough now, and I'm going to be adding a little more in our trainings around this, but I've been doing this long enough now that I can look at a lead even before my discovery call. I can look at a lead when they come in for my inquiry form, and I can pretty much tell you what I think the package they should be on is based
Mhm.
on what they're telling me. Because I just know from trial and error what works and what doesn't. And like I said, it's really tempting to come in and be like, "Oh, I can do my whole package. There's so much we could do here." But I always want to make sure that I'm thinking about the bigger picture and I'm thinking like, okay, we're going to do this strategy, but I can already see this gap on your team and you're
Yeah.
going to need this person. So I'm
Yep.
not going to take up your budget because I don't want to be that person. That's not my role.
Yeah.
And so there's often times that I will do a strategy, help them place a person, not as an HR
Yes.
recruiter, but help
Yeah.
them figure out what does that look like. And then be on as a CMO in a mid tier package or an
Yeah.
advisory package. So then
Yeah.
you do get to still stay up there in the strategy, but it actually works because they have the right people to tick all the boxes and, keep
Yeah.
everything flowing that is needed.
I can already see where I can put some more questions into the lead process to figure out
Totally.
that information before we even get on a call.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps clarify. And I think for me, it just felt important to have this conversation
Yeah.
because you said to me, how do I position this? It doesn't feel like a fractional CMO anymore. And
Mm,
it actually is. It is a
it is.
CMO.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not uncommon. I will say probably everybody who starts this role without guidance does that and
Mhm.
makes these mistakes. And I can say this with certainty because I've talked to so many marketers about it.
Mhm.
So I want to normalize that for you. It's just
Yeah.
so normal. And I wanted to have this conversation because what you love doing is fractional CMO work.
Mm.
And it's why I started Fractional CMO School.
Yeah.
Like I want to help people do this in a way that feels really good because I'm so passionate about us doing work that we love and that lights us up and getting paid great money to do that. And we
Mhm.
can. And so, that's what I love doing is just helping my students and other marketers navigate this in a way that feels great and helping you like calibrate and be like, okay, this is where you went wrong in the learnings for next time and how you can best position it. So we won't get into this on the call, but in Fractional CMO School, I want to spend some time with you really diving into the sales process because
Yes.
there is really nuanced things that I do, like I said, from that very first touch point all the way through me working with clients that position you as the leader in a CMO. And so we'll dive into that so that the next clients that come your way, you're starting off on the right foot from like the very first conversation and expectations are set. When you do that, all of these boundary pieces, like all of that becomes so much easier because
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a bait and switch. They're not like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wait, what? I thought this." Like they're so
Yes.
clear from the outset. So we'll talk through that. And then I also want to spend some time in fractional CMO school talking about the AI systems and processes
Mhm.
because I've had a couple of people have similar questions and say, I love AI and I can totally see ways of bringing this into my clients' businesses, but it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like fractional CMO work. And I think that we're in a really interesting time where we get to, and also we have to be in this
Yeah.
messy middle of AI being explosive right now and changing every single week and all of
Yeah.
the things. But what I wanted to share was my perspective on this is I think that as the CMO, if we pull back and we say, I'm responsible for the marketing function, I do believe that is what does AI look like? What is
Yeah.
AI for us? How
Yeah.
do we think about AI when we're hiring? How does the team use AI? What is AI
Mhm.
versus a human in our workflows? And
Mm.
not that we want to get into the granular, but all of that I definitely still see as falling under the CMO scope for sure.
Yeah.
And one last thing is I think that I'm seeing a lot of, I'll say like workflows or tools or whatever. And what I mean by that is someone building a Claude skill that helps you take,
Mhm.
let's say, your podcast transcript and turn it into an email, or
Mhm.
somebody building a custom GPT that's going to help with content. And you could be sitting here, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer right now because it's changing so quickly, but
Yeah.
you could argue that building those things out is not CMO work, or you could argue that it
Mhm.
is. I
Mhm.
personally think if you are sort of installing your IP, like your way of
Mhm.
thinking and your
Mhm.
strategy into these things, that to me is CMO work.
Yep,
Because
I
instead of
agree.
handing over a strategy document being like, here's your retention strategy, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, here's the tool to do this. And it's
Yes.
woven in with my 25 years of experience and how I approach XYZ. And now your team can go do this in like a fifth of the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So they almost sit side by side, the strategy, the recommendations, plus here's how your team can do it super, super fast. Here's how, with my experience, here's how I manage that and do that. And even putting them in touch with someone who could build, the dashboard for them or,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's not unlike other areas in marketing. I have other revenue streams in my business. Like, for example, if they need a copywriter, I mean, it's changing with AI, but if they need, let's say, a graphic
Mhm.
designer for a website, I have contractors I will bring in as subcontractors of mine because I know and trust them. And so they're kind of an extension of my team. And so I have
Mhm.
a bit of a revenue stream from that. There's no reason AI can't be the same. Hey, you need
Mhm.
this, this, and this. Joanne over here is can build it out for you. And this is what
Yeah.
that would look like. So
Yeah.
scoping that as an extra cost as
Mm.
the implementation or even the ongoing fee of it. I think a lot of us are still kind of working out what that model looks like. But if your IP is installed into these tools, maybe those live on your accounts and
Yeah.
they're paying part of their
Mm.
fee is that, you're working with me on
Mm.
this package. You also get all these AI tools and you might at some point downgrade to advisory or leave. But if you want these, the ongoing fee of that is $1,000
Mm.
or 2,000 a month or something like that. So, then you're not giving away your IP forever to a client
Yeah.
for,
True.
for no additional cost, right?
Yeah.
And all your years of experience like baked into these tools. So
Mhm.
we could have a whole other podcast episode on
Yeah,
that, but it's
definitely.
a really interesting topic. But I
Yeah.
definitely think that, put it this way, the way I see it is if you're a marketing leader, if you're a CMO and you're not talking about how the company should be using AI, then you shouldn't be doing this job right now. Like that might be a
Yes.
hot take, but
Get with the
I
program.
I really think that you need to be looking at it.
Oh,
And like
yeah. You
from
need
both ways. Like there's pros and cons, but we need to look at it and say like how are we all using this? How are we
Yeah.
not using it, right? Like what
Yeah.
are the guardrails around this?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I almost need to press pause for, like, 2 months, upskill as much as possible because I probably like you, if something is impacting clients and making things better and easier, I'm gonna go be an expert on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I understand the temptation. I often feel like that. I'm like, AI could be a whole full-time job. Like, and it is for some people, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a lot. But
Mhm.
I also sense a little bit of a theme of like wanting to over deliver and have it
Yeah.
perfect and like the pressure on yourself. And I say
Yeah.
that just because I'm the same way. It's like you
Yeah.
want to go like figure it out and bring it all back perfect.
Yeah.
But something that has really helped me with clients, both with AI and not, is being okay doing things a little messy and being like,
Mm.
hey, this is developing right now,
Yeah.
especially
I'm
AI.
learning at the same
I'm
time as you.
learning, you're
Yeah.
learning. I guarantee you're going to know more than almost all of your clients.
Yes. Yeah.
And level of what you know and you're feeling messy or showing up messy is not going to feel messy for them.
No.
And if you think about what we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, how you developed, and I had done this too, this very complex, comprehensive, overwhelming
Mhm.
strategy. We don't want
Mhm.
to go repeat the same thing with AI,
No.
right? So
Yeah.
when we think about AI, when we think about as marketers, my head could explode with all the ideas
Yeah.
I've saved of how we could
Yeah.
use AI.
Yeah.
But what is the simplest thing we can do right now?
Yeah.
Like for my client who uses AI, I have given them a skill that has said, when you're writing copy, never say this. Here's the voice we want. The
Yeah.
skill took me like a few hours to create.
Mm.
And that might feel like, oh my God, we're just scratching the surface. There's a million things we could do. But to the point of the strategy, like what's simple and not
Mm,
overwhelming and what's going to save them time. And we
mm,
can
a
layer
lot,
that on,
yeah.
right? Because
Yes. No,
that's
that
going to
you're
be
so right.
so valuable. They're writing copy all the time. They're using AI. I'm constantly saying, hey, stop saying leaking in your copy or
Right.
whatever. These
Yeah.
weird AI tells. If I can just program your AI to never do that again, boom,
Yeah.
I've saved you lots of time and your copy is suddenly way better. And again, it
Yeah.
might feel like this tiny little thing, but those things really stack and add up. So I would say I challenge you, instead of like, I'm going to take some time off and
Yes.
go whatever, I would say, okay, look at your team and look at where their biggest time sucks and where are they struggling right now? And what is the 1 hour task
Mm,
or quick 5 minute thing that
quick
you can
win.
do
Yeah.
to support them? Because it's
Yeah.
probably easier than you're making out in your mind. And
Yeah.
they probably would get a lot more value and appreciate something simple rather than complex.
Yes. Don't
Yeah.
overwhelm them.
Right? Yeah. But
Yes.
I understand because my brain works the exact same way.
Yeah. Yeah. We're our own worst enemy sometimes.
Totally. Okay, well, anything else before we wrap up? I'm so grateful
Mm.
for you being here and having this conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad we had it. Definitely had those. Yes, that's the biggest part where I went wrong. Yeah. So grateful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And just to recap for everyone, role clarity, boundaries, having
Hmm.
that filter around what you're doing, clear process for selling this, matching with the right clients, all of those things are so important. And again, this is such a good example of how this role can expand if you're not
Hmm.
really sure and clear on what this should look like. So thank you for being here, for having this conversation. I think that you're going to really help a lot of other people just understand the role a little bit better.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So, if you're building a fractional CMO business and you don't want to waste years figuring it out the hard way, Fractional CMO School is open for enrollment, and we'll give you the step-by-step roadmap that I used to build my business to 6 figures in 6 months and then $1 million per year with a small team of 2. There's expert coaching, one-on-one support, and whether you are an aspiring fractional CMO or you're growing, you're trying to figure out how to scale your team or do the role in a way that doesn't lead to burnout, it is a great fit for you. And you can learn more at thecmooffice.com. If you love this episode today, here is what I would love from you. Take 30 seconds to rate and review the show. It helps more marketers and CMOs find this content. Hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're going to implement any of this or you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out in my DMs on Instagram. I would love to support you. And thank you for listening. I will see you next week.